July 7th, 1968, Wells Restaurant, Harlem. 2:47 a.m., two men sit across from each other in a corner booth. One is dying, the other doesn't know it yet. Bumpy Johnson orders steak. Medium rare, he always orders steak. Frank Lucas orders nothing. He never eats when Bumpy talks. Because when Bumpy talks, you listen, not because you want to. Because legends don't repeat themselves, the restaurant is empty, not by accident. Bumpy owns the silence here. He owns the streets outside. He owns the cops who don't patrol this block. And tonight, he's about to give it all away. Frank watches Bumpy's hands. They're shaking, not from fear, from something worse, time. Bumpy cuts into his steak. Blood pools on the white plate. He looks at it like he's seeing his own future. You know why you're here, Frank? Frank doesn't answer. You don't answer Bumpy's questions. You wait for Bumpy's answers. You're here because everybody else is loud. You're quiet. Loud men die in Harlem. Quiet men become kings. Bumpy takes one bite, just one. Then he pushes the plate away, a 70 steak, untouched. In 1968, that's a week's rent. Bumpy Johnson doesn't waste money, unless he's making a point. I'm giving you something tonight, Frank. Not money, not connections, something worth more. Frank leans forward. I'm giving you the throne. But there's a price. There's always a price. Bumpy slides an envelope across the table. Inside, there are no drugs, no cash, just three names, written in Bumpy's handwriting. The handwriting is shaky. Bumpy's hands weren't shaking last week. These three men will try to kill you within 6 months of me dying. Not because they hate you, because you'll have what they want. Frank looks at the names. He recognizes all of them. One is his cousin. You listening, Frank? I'm listening. Good, because in 48 minutes, I'm going to collapse at this table. Heart attack. The ambulance will take 11 minutes to arrive. I'll be dead before we reach the hospital. And when I die, every vulture in Harlem is going to come for my empire. The Italians, the cops, your own people. And you're going to be the only man in this restaurant who walks out alive tonight. You know why? Frank doesn't answer. Because you're the only one I told. Bumpy reaches into his jacket. Frank's hand moves to his waist, instinct. But Bumpy doesn't pull a gun. He pulls out a small wooden box, carved mahogany. Worth nothing, worth everything. Open it after I'm gone, not before, you understand? I understand. No, you don't, but you will. Bumpy stands up. He drops 2 100 bills on the table for a steak he didn't finish, for a conversation that will change everything. The silent man lives, Frank. The loud man dies. Remember that when they offer you the mink coat. Those were the last words Bumpy Johnson ever said. 43 minutes later, he collapsed. Frank Lucas walked out of that restaurant alone. And he never told anyone what was in that box. Until now. La Grange, North Carolina, 1941. Frank Lucas is 15 when he learns that respect isn't given. It's taken. Or it's lost forever. His father's hat lies in the red dirt. His mother's hands shake behind the screen door. A white man with a badge and a smile stands on their porch, explaining how the world works. You don't look up. You don't talk back. You don't forget your place. Frank watches his father nod, bend, retrieve his hat from the dust. The officer laughs. Not because it's funny, because he can. That night, Frank doesn't sleep. There's a line burning in his brain. If a man can take your respect, he already owns your life. 4 days later, Frank waits outside Miller's Tavern with his father's revolver and a decision. When the officer walks out, drunk and loud, Frank doesn't say a word. One shot. Close range. The loud man goes quiet forever. Frank's mother hands him everything she has. 12 crumpled dollars and a coat stolen from a clothesline. You run. she says. You don't come back. Not ever. Frank boards the northbound bus. He doesn't look back. Looking back is for men who have something to lose. Harlem, 1946. The war is over, and the streets are learning a new language. Heroin. Numbers. Territory. Money moves faster than blood. But blood moves too. Frank steps off the bus with 12 and a murder behind him. He's nobody from nowhere. In Harlem, that's either a death sentence or a disguise. Frank chooses disguise. He rents a bed in a hallway for $3 a week, eats once a day when he's lucky. But he doesn't complain. Complaining is noise. Noise gets noticed. Getting noticed gets you killed. So Frank becomes a shadow. He drives trucks, moves packages, stands in the back of pool halls writing down names and numbers in his head. He watches the hustlers in their sharp suits, the pimps in their purple coats, the dealers flashing rolls of cash. He watches them rise. Then he watches them fall. The lesson burns itself into his brain. Loud men die. Quiet men survive. Flashy men get robbed. Invisible men get rich. For 6 years, Frank perfects the art of being nobody. He works for anyone who pays, asks no questions, keeps no secrets because nobody tells him any. He saves every dollar in a shoebox, stacking small bills like building blocks. He studies the ecosystem. Which cops take money? Which bars are fronts? Which blocks belong to which bosses? And one name floats above all others like smoke. Bumpy Johnson. The king of Harlem. The man who told the Italian mafia they could own Manhattan, but Harlem belonged to him. Frank hears the name whispered in bars, spoken in code on corners. He studies Bumpy from a distance the way other men study scripture. Frank is collecting money for a numbers runner when he sees it happen. Wells Restaurant, 125th Street, 2:13 in the afternoon. Bumpy Johnson sits across from Johnny Rogers, a lieutenant who skimmed. 47 from the weekly take. $47. Most kingpins wouldn't notice. Bumpy notices everything. Frank watches through the window. 2 plates, 2 drinks, bread broken like family. Bumpy tells stories. Johnny laughs, relaxes. Maybe he thinks Bumpy doesn't know. Maybe he thinks 47 isn't worth dying over. Maybe he thinks sharing a meal means forgiveness. He's wrong. They walk outside together, still talking, still friendly. Then Bumpy stops in the middle of the sidewalk. No warning, no speech. He pulls a blackjack from his coat and hits Johnny once behind the ear. Clean, surgical, final. Johnny drops like someone cut his strings. Most people scatter. They don't want to be witnesses. Frank doesn't move. He stands across the street, watching Bumpy adjust his tie, brush off his sleeve, walk away like nothing happened. Frank isn't horrified. He's fascinated. This isn't murder. It's correction. It's discipline. Bumpy didn't kill out of anger. He killed out of principle. Bumpy feels eyes on him. He turns, sees Frank staring. Most men would look away, pretend they didn't see. Frank meets his gaze, not defiant, not cowering, just watching, learning. Bumpy crosses the street, stops in front of Frank. Up close, he smells like Old Spice and authority. You scared? Frank thinks about lying, thinks about what the safe answer is supposed to be. Then he tells the truth. No, I'm learning. Bumpy studies Frank's face, sees something he recognizes. Discipline, hunger, the absence of vanity. He sees a mirror from 20 years ago. What's your name? Frank Lucas. You work for somebody, Frank? I work for anybody who pays. Bumpy nods slowly. Wrong answer. You work for me now. But you don't carry a gun. Any fool can pull a trigger. You carry a notebook. Write down everything I say. Because I'm only going to say it once. Frank feels the world tilt. The nobody from nowhere just got invited into the king's shadow. But shadows are dangerous places. Every man who stands next to a throne becomes a target. Frank doesn't know it yet, but the second he says yes, there are men in Harlem who start planning his funeral. Because in this game, the student either becomes the king or becomes the corpse. And Frank Lucas just enrolled in the deadliest school in America. The notebook is leather-bound, unmarked, and already half-filled before Bumpy Johnson ever speaks to Frank Lucas. For 5 years, that notebook becomes Frank's Bible, written in a cramped hand during long nights in the back seat of a 1956 Lincoln Continental. The car glides through Harlem's arteries like a black shark, radio silent, windows up, carrying the most dangerous education in America. Bumpy doesn't teach Frank how to sell drugs. He teaches him how to think like a king. The first lesson comes on a Tuesday, parked outside a bustling laundromat on 116th Street. Steam rises from the vents. Women carry baskets. Quarters flow like water. Bumpy points at the building with a manicured finger. "Who owns that, Frank?" Frank reads the faded sign. "Sal's Laundry." Bumpy shakes his head. "Wrong. The bank owns the bricks. The city owns the land. Sal owns the machines. I own Sal." They drive through Bumpy's empire, the butcher on 7th who pays protection, the bar on 135th that runs numbers, the church that launders money through donation plates. At every stop, people thank Bumpy, hand him envelopes, treat him like a mayor, not a criminal. Frank waits to see the headquarters, the office, the building where the strings are pulled. It never comes. "Never own what you control," Bumpy explains as they sit in the car. The Italians own buildings. Buildings can be seized. Buildings can be taxed. Buildings burn. I own men. Men are harder to seize. My name isn't on a single deed, lease, or bank account in this city. The Ayers can take a building. They can't take a handshake. Frank writes it down. Invisibility is the ultimate armor. The second lesson tastes like broken glass. They drive to Little Italy, to a social club that smells of garlic and arrogance. Men in silk suits laugh too loud, drink wine that costs more than Frank's rent. They look at Bumpy like hired help. Frank's hand twitches toward his waist. He wants to silence the room. But Bumpy smiles, bows his head, lets Fat Tony call him boy, takes the envelope they slide across the table, a pittance, and thanks them. He plays the fool, the servant. The ride back is silent for 20 blocks. Frank's blood boils. Finally, Bumpy speaks. "You're angry." Frank nods. "They disrespected you." Bumpy corrects him. "They underestimated me. There's a difference. And that difference is how we win." He counts the bills with surgical precision. They think I work for them. They think Harlem is theirs and I'm just the manager. Let them think that. A man who fears you will fight you. A man who dismisses you will turn his back. Always let them turn their back. Frank realizes the performance wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Humility is a weapon. The third lesson comes with a price. Detective Malone sits in their booth at the Uptown Club, sweating, nervous, asking for double his usual. $500. Bumpy gives it to him. But then he writes something in his notebook, tears out the page, and burns it. "That man is dead," Bumpy says, watching the paper turn to ash. He just doesn't know it yet. Frank asks why. "Because he got comfortable. You pay a man to look the other way, Frank. You don't pay him to be your friend. A man who takes a bribe once is a tool. A man who takes it forever thinks he's a partner. Partners feel entitled. Partners talk. Bumpy leans back. The system is your enemy and your tool. You can rent their silence, but you can never buy their loyalty." Each lesson comes with a test. Frank collects debts, negotiates deals, observes meetings. One wrong word starts a war. One mistake gets him killed. He learns to sleep 3 hours a night. Read faces. Predict betrayals. By 1967, Bumpy's hands shake when he lights cigarettes. His suits hang loose. The coughing rattles windows. The wolves notice. The Italians delay shipments. The cops patrol more aggressively. Winter. Bumpy's apartment. Curtains drawn. The smell of medicine and mahogany. Bumpy sits small in his chair, a blanket over his legs. "I'm dying," he says. No emotion, just fact. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less. He pulls out a map, not of New York, of Southeast Asia. "When I'm gone, the Italians will try to take Harlem back. You're going to stop them. Not with guns. With something they'll never see coming." Frank's education is ending. The final exam is life or death. Wells' restaurant smells like fried chicken and ghosts. July 7th, 1968. The lights stay on past closing because Bumpy Johnson owns the silence here. Every table empty. Every witness paid to disappear. Just 2 men and a conversation that will crown a king or bury him. Bumpy orders steak. Medium rare. Always medium rare. The blood pools on white porcelain like a prophecy. Frank orders nothing. When legends speak, eating is disrespectful. Bumpy cuts 1 piece, chews slowly, then pushes the 70 plate away, untouched, wasted. But waste sends a message. Tonight isn't about hunger, it's about legacy. You know the Italians' mistake? Bumpy's voice carries less thunder than before. Weaker. Mortal. They think they control supply. They buy from Corsicans in Marseille. Corsicans buy from Turks. Turks buy from farmers. 5 middlemen between the poppy and the needle, each one takes a cut, waters it down. By the time it reaches Harlem, it's 30% pure and costs a fortune. He slides a map across the table. Not New York. Southeast Asia. Red circles around Thailand, Laos, Vietnam. The Golden Triangle. I spent 2 years in the Pacific during the war. Made friends. Real friends. The kind who owe me their lives. They grow 98% pure. They'll sell it to you for what the street pays per ounce. Frank studies the roots without touching the paper. Touching is claiming. How do I move it? Bumpy's smile carries 20 years of planning. Coffins. Dead soldiers coming home from Vietnam. Nobody searches a hero's casket. Patriotism is perfect camouflage. You'll move more product in 1 month than the Italians move in 6. And you'll own every step from poppy field to needle. The plan isn't just business. It's revolution. Cut 5 middlemen, control purity, undercut the competition, own the supply chain. Frank sees empires falling and rising in those red circles. But I won't see it. Bumpy says, "You will." From his jacket he pulls a white envelope, sealed with black wax. 3 names. Men who will betray you within 6 months of my death. One is your cousin Nate. Blood doesn't beat hunger, Frank. Blood just makes the knife twist deeper. One is Red Williams, my oldest lieutenant. 40 years I've known him. He thinks loyalty earned him the throne. The third is Detective Lou Toback, 15 years of Christmas envelopes. The second I'm gone, he flips to whoever pays more. Frank takes the envelope. It weighs nothing. It carries everything. Why now? Because enemies are most dangerous when they think they're still friends. Then comes the box. Small, mahogany. Carved with symbols that predate Harlem's concrete, Bumpy sets it down like it might explode. When you're about to lose everything, open this. Not before. You open it too early, it won't make sense. Too late, it won't matter. You'll know when. Bumpy checks his watch. 38 minutes. Heart attack. Right here. This booth. Don't call for help immediately. Let me finish what I came to say. Kings don't die in hospitals with machines beeping. They die on thrones giving final orders. The clock ticks like a countdown, each second stealing pieces of the legend across from him. At 3:17 a.m., Bumpy's hand clutches his chest. His breathing changes. Sharp. Desperate. He looks at Frank with eyes that built empires. You ready? Frank nods once. Bumpy collapses forward, his head hits the table. The sound echoes through empty space. Frank doesn't move. He counts seconds, 180 of them. Bumpy's lips move one last time. Make them remember my name by forgetting yours. Then silence. Frank stands, pockets the envelope and box, drops $200 bills on the table. He walks to the door without looking back. His reflection shows a man who just inherited a kingdom and a death sentence simultaneously. Outside, a black Cadillac idles across the street. Engine running. Windows dark. Someone has been watching, waiting for the king to die. Frank doesn't run, doesn't reach for his waist. He walks straight toward the car, each step a declaration. The nobody from nowhere is gone. The silent man lives. Class is over. The final exam begins now. Bangkok smells like rain, gasoline, and opportunity. 1969. The heat sticks to Frank's skin like guilt as he sits across from Lueci Rubiwat in a tea house that exists in the spaces between maps. No translators. No witnesses. Just two men negotiating the future of American addiction. Lueci served with Bumpy in the Pacific Theater, saved his life twice at Guadalcanal. Now he's repaying a 20-year-old debt to a stranger who carries Bumpy's name like a passport to hell. 98% pure, Lueci says, sliding a small bag across the bamboo table. The powder looks innocent, white as baby formula, deadly as plutonium, direct from Golden Triangle fields. No middlemen, no cuts. What the Italians sell for $20,000 per kilo, I sell for $4. Frank does the math without moving his lips. The numbers don't just add up, they explode. The Italians buy from Corsicans in Marseille, who buy from Turks, who buy from farmers. 5 hands touching the product. 5 cuts taken. 5 reasons why their heroin reaches Harlem at 30% purity and costs a fortune. Frank sees the entire supply chain collapsing into his palm. But the genius isn't the product, it's the delivery system. Dead soldiers, Lueci explains, his voice dropping to a whisper that carries the weight of sacrilege. Heroes coming home from Vietnam. Military coffins sealed with flags and ceremony. Who searches a fallen patriot? Who dishonors the dead? Frank sees it immediately. Patriotism as camouflage, respect as a shield. The ultimate invisibility cloak woven from grief and honor. The cadaver connection is born in that moment. Not from greed, from genius. Within 6 months, Frank's heroin floods Harlem like a biblical plague. He brands it blue magic, not because it's blue, because magic sells better than murder, and Frank is selling both. The product speaks for itself with a voice that silences competition. 98% pure versus the Italians' 30% garbage cut with baby laxative and quinine. Junkies don't lie about quality, their bodies can't afford to. Frank undercuts the mafia by 40% and still makes triple their profit. The mathematics are beautiful in their brutality. No Corsican middleman stealing 20%. No Turkish smuggler taking 15%. No Marseille connection demanding 30%. Frank owns every step from poppy field to needle. The Italians built their empire on markup. Frank builds his on volume and purity. By 1970, Frank Lucas makes $1 million per day. Not per week. Not per month. Per day. Cash money that arrives in duffel bags and disappears into walls. He becomes the richest black man in America. Richer than athletes who fill stadiums. Richer than entertainers who sell millions of records. Richer than anyone who looks like him has ever been in the history of the country. But nobody knows, because Frank remembers every lesson Bumpy ever taught him. He lives in a modest split-level house in Teaneck, New Jersey. Drives a Chevy Impala that blends into traffic like camouflage. Wears J.C. Penney suits that whisper middle management, not drug kingpin. No jewelry, no entourage, no interviews, no photographs. His own crew barely knows his net worth. When they count money in his presence, Frank leaves the room. Invisibility isn't a strategy, it's survival. The cops investigate the Italians. The DIA watches the mafia families. The FBI monitors known criminals with thick files and longer rap sheets. Frank Lucas doesn't exist in their databases. He's a ghost making millions while everyone searches for monsters with familiar faces. For 3 years, perfection. The silent man lives while the loud men die in prison cells and newspaper headlines. Then March 8, 1971. Madison Square Garden. Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. The fight of the century. Every king in New York shows up to be seen. Mafia captains, Wall Street titans, Hollywood royalty. The arena becomes a zoo of money and ego, and Frank's wife Ava wants to be part of it. She stands outside a Furrier on 7th Avenue, eyes locked on one coat. Chinchilla. Full length. Soft as sin and twice as expensive. $47,000 cash. More than most families earn in 5 years. You want it? Frank asks, hearing Bumpy's ghost whisper warnings in his ear. Eva's smile could melt steel. You can afford it. Frank hears Bumpy's voice like thunder in his skull. The loud man dies. The silent man lives. Never own what you control. But his wife's eyes shine with pride, with hunger for recognition, with the desire to celebrate what they've built in shadows. And Frank thinks, just once. Just one night. What's the harm in being seen? The coat goes over his shoulders like a crown made of fur. The matching hat sits on his head like a declaration of war against invisibility. At the Garden, he walks to ringside seats that cost more than cars. Front row. Center ring. Right in front of the cameras that capture everything for posterity and prosecution. Flashbulbs pop like gunshots. The coat glows under arena lights like a beacon, like a target. Frank Lucas, the invisible man, sits where only millionaires sit, wearing what only kings can afford. Gangsters stare. Italians whisper. Even Muhammad Ali glances at the fur between rounds. In Newark, Detective Richie Roberts eats a cold sandwich at his desk, flipping through the Daily News sports section. He's an honest cop in a dirty department, hated by colleagues for turning in found money instead of splitting it. He sees the photo spread from the fight, stops chewing, studies one face he doesn't recognize surrounded by faces he does. Roberts circles the photo with a red pen, writes one question in the margin that will topple an empire. Who the hell is that? The invisible man just became visible, and visibility is a death sentence in a world built on shadows. Within 2 weeks, the 3 betrayals Bumpy predicted arrive simultaneously like coordinated strikes from hell. Nate, Frank's cousin, blood of his blood, tries to reroute a Bangkok shipment to his own crew. Family doesn't mean partnership. It means the knife cuts deeper. Red Williams, Bumpy's oldest lieutenant, 40 years of shared secrets forgotten, meets with Genovese family captains in Brooklyn, offering to broker peace and profit if they eliminate the upstart who stole Harlem's throne. And Detective Lou Toback, 15 years of Christmas envelopes and birthday bonuses erased by fear, walks into the DIA office with a name, an address, and a detailed operational breakdown of the most successful drug operation in American history. Frank sits in his New Jersey kitchen, listening to 3 different fires burn his empire simultaneously. The house is quiet. Too quiet. The millions hidden in the walls mock him now. All that money. All that power. All that respect. Destroyed by a coat. He walks to his safe with hands that built kingdoms and are about to watch them fall. Inside, behind the cash and documents, sits the small mahogany box Bumpy gave him 3 years ago. The wood is cool to the touch, carved with symbols that predate Harlem's concrete and steel. Bumpy's words echo like prophecy. When you're about to lose everything, open this. Not before. If you open it too early, it won't make sense. If you open it too late, it won't matter. Frank looks at the front door, listens for sirens that aren't coming yet but will arrive soon, looks back at the box that holds either salvation or confirmation of his doom. The silent man wore the loud coat. Now it's time to pay the price. Frank Lucas lifts the lid and discovers what legends leave behind when empires fall. The mahogany box opens without ceremony. Inside, no emergency millions, no blackmail photographs, no keys to hidden kingdoms. Just two pieces of paper that explain everything and solve nothing. A photograph first, black and white, slightly blurred. Wells Restaurant, July 7, 1968. Two men in their booth, Bumpy Johnson and Frank Lucas, their last supper. But here's the revelation that cuts like broken glass. Someone took this picture. Someone Bumpy saw, but Frank didn't. The caption on the back, written in Bumpy's trembling hand, "The Last Supper. I saw the photographer. You didn't." Even dying, Bumpy was 3 moves ahead. Even in his final lesson, he was teaching Frank about invisible enemies. The letter unfolds like a death warrant written in prophecy. Bumpy's handwriting, shaky but sharp. If you're reading this, you forgot the first lesson. The silent man lives. The loud man dies. You wore the coat, didn't you? Or the watch? Or the car? Doesn't matter what. Visibility killed you. I knew it would. Not because you're weak. Because you're human. And humans want to be seen for what they've built. Frank reads those words while sirens wail in the distance. Blue lights paint his New Jersey kitchen in shades of ending. Bumpy knew. He knew Frank would eventually break the rules, not out of stupidity, out of inevitability. Because every king who builds an empire in shadows eventually wants to step into the light. Power doesn't corrupt first. Visibility kills first. The letter's final paragraph carries the weight of nuclear strategy. When the empire falls, burn it all down. Don't let them have it. If you can't be king, make sure there's no kingdom left for your enemies. They'll call you a rat. They'll spit on your name. But you'll be alive, and they'll be in cages or graves. January 28, 1975. The DEA kicks down doors across 3 states simultaneously. 52 arrests. $25 million seized. The cadaver connection exposed. Blue magic destroyed. Frank Lucas faces life in prison. 70 years minimum. He should die in a federal cage. Instead, Frank does something nobody expects. He cooperates, not with tears, not with begging, with surgical precision. But here's the twist the streets never understand. Frank isn't snitching to save himself. He's executing Bumpy's final order. Burn it all down. He gives them 75 corrupt NIPT officers. Names, badge numbers, exact bribe amounts. He exposes 3 judges who fixed cases for cash. He details politician protection schemes reaching into City Hall. Then he aims the nuclear option at his real target, the Italian mafia families who wanted him dead. Frank maps their entire heroin network with the precision Bumpy taught him. Genovese suppliers, Lucchese distribution channels, Gambino money laundering operations. His testimony leads to over 100 convictions. He dismantles the French connection. He destroys the Special Investigations Unit. He burns the forest down so no one else can hunt in it. The underworld screams betrayal. The streets call him a rat. They don't understand the strategy. Frank isn't saving himself. He's eliminating his competition. Better to destroy the throne than let your enemies sit on it. Life sentence becomes 15 years. 15 becomes 5 with parole. Frank walks out of prison in 1981, 49 years old, broke, and universally hated. The millions are gone. The empire is rubble. The respect is poison. But he's breathing, and here's what the streets never calculated. Frank Lucas outlives them all. He dies May 30th, 2019, at 88 years old. Peacefully, in bed, surrounded by family. He outlasts every man who betrayed him. Nate, his cousin, dies in prison in 1989. Red Williams, Bumpy's oldest lieutenant, gets killed in a prison yard in 1983. Detective Lou Toback eats his gun in 1986. The Italian mafia captains who ordered his death spend decades in federal cages or die violent deaths in power struggles. Frank Lucas, the rat, the traitor, the man who broke every street code, dies old and free while his enemies die young and caged. So was it worth it? The money that vanished, the power that crumbled, the respect that turned to hatred, the legend that became infamy. Did Frank Lucas win or lose? Bumpy Johnson would say he won. Because the game isn't about dying rich. It's about dying free. Frank sacrificed his reputation to eliminate his competition. He chose survival over respect, life over legend. And in a world where most players die young or die in prison, Frank Lucas died old in his own bed. The silent man wore the loud coat, paid the price, burned the kingdom, and walked away alive. Maybe that's the only victory that matters. Not the throne you claim, but the grave you avoid. Not the empire you build, but the enemies you outlast. Not the respect you earn, but the breath you keep. The question isn't whether Frank Lucas was a king or a rat. The question is simpler and harder. Would you trade your reputation for your life, your legend for your freedom, your throne for your survival? Frank Lucas answered yes, and lived long enough to see every man who called him a coward die before him. In the end, the last man standing isn't always the loudest. Sometimes he's just the one who remembered the first lesson. The silent man lives, the loud man dies, and the man who burns it all down walks away from the ashes.